We're ending 2017 with really extraordinary events in UK, very, very dangerous stuff coming in, and we're going to start off with hate.
Yes, the Home Affairs Select Committee meeting this morning. This is the continuing inquiry into online hate. Yvette Cooper there in the chair, and she was quizzing some representatives from Facebook, Google and Twitter. Quite a bit of the focus was on hate in the sense of people who hated MPs, Brian. So increasingly unsurprising that people tend to hate MPs, but there's a little bit about terrorism and other types of hate crime as well. She was particularly interested in asking the Three Stooges here about their actions that they'd taken since the publication of this report. This is the House of Commons Home Affairs Committee, Hate Crime, Abuse, Hate and Extremism Online. This was published in April this year. We covered it at the time. So she asked each of the representatives, to give some idea of what they had done since this report was published. So first of all, we've got the Facebook representative, who is Simon Milner, Director of Public Policy at Facebook. Now, he said that since the Home Affairs meeting in April, they had added 3,000 staff. They'd taken their staff in the community operations team from 3,000 rather to more than 7,500 people whose jobs is only to review content on Facebook. And on top of that, they're building up a team of 20,000 people to deal with safety and security. So this is quite an impressive, staggering amount of resource that they're putting into this. Now, he did push back a little bit on Yvette Cooper when she was asking about content that had been raised in April, which apparently hadn't been taken down to her satisfaction. And he said, well, when they look at taking material down, it's not just whether the material is offensive or not, but it's also the context. So, for example, he's saying, in fact, all of them were saying the same thing. It's extremely difficult to automate removing material from these platforms because, for example, news organizations might be using the same material to put forward a particular narrative, and they don't want to affect that, and so on. Twitter, well, the lady from Twitter, she said that Twitter has employing 10 times more staff than they had in April to deal with accounts that are putting out difficult content for them. She was given a pretty hard time by Yvette Cooper because apparently in April, Twitter had identified to them some specific tweets that the government wanted to see taken down, or the Select Committee rather wanted to see taken down, and they turned up at this meeting without having taken them down, and these were tweets apparently which were offensive to MPs. So Twitter, for some reason, hadn't taken them down, and that wasn't terribly satisfactory to the Home Affairs Committee. And then Google stroke YouTube, they said that they're increasing their staff for dealing with these issues from 4,500 people to 10,000 people. They said they're putting huge amounts of resource into machine learning and AI, but they said that the final judgment on this is made by a human being. But the other thing that they admitted to in this is something that we have suspected or believed for a long time. And they have admitted in their evidence today that they do flag certain certain content providers, and once those content providers are flagged, that they are downgraded in terms of appearing in related videos, links, and so on. So they are admitting to active censorship based on not necessarily individual pieces of content, but content providers as a whole. Brian?
This doesn't surprise me at all. I think it's worth dealing with this issue of hate. Of course, what is the definition of hate? The government is trying to introduce definitions. These are ever broader. So that's a danger itself. Are people starting to hate their MPs? I think that's correct. And I think it's a shame, because what we really should have is appropriate anger. Anger is a suitable human emotion. on occasions, and provided that doesn't translate into violence, we've got a useful human emotion. So people are beginning to look at their MPs. They realise that MPs are not doing their job. They've got no morality. They've got no courage to stand up and be counted. So a lot of passion is coming onto the social media networks. But what does the government do? Says, well, oh, this is terrible. This is hate. And we've now got to attempt to filter this out. But the other thing I wanted to pick up on there, you're saying that the firms are saying it's difficult to use some form of algorithm to take out this so-called hate speech, and it might be too close to what the mainstream media are saying. I think this shows that actually the social media on many occasions is absolutely mature, because they are using clips from the media to show and prove what is really taking place. So instead of it just being gossip, you've now got more and more factual information circulating, which is causing a problem for the machines.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that they reminded of Ed Cooper was that the three main organisations had created this, the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, and of course, it is amazing how they attempt to conflate terrorism with hate speech, with merely material that they don't want to see on the internet. But here we go. This is what they've done, and there's the thing that I found of particular concern here is that the three big social media networks, Google, Facebook, and Twitter, are using this platform to provide best practice for smaller organizations. So what we're going to see is their technology and their ways of dealing with this problem, in inverted commas, filtering down to smaller competition. And of course, they don't really have any competition of any size. So that means that people that maybe are being having difficulty getting their positions across because they're being censored by the big players are looking at some of the smaller up and coming networks as a place to get their information out.
Yep.
And what this is saying is, no, we're going to sort that problem out as well. And the other thing was that they said that they would be actively redirecting people. So if people were searching for information on a particular subject and maybe had shown some preponderance to look at particular sources of information, that in future, maybe when they went to try and look at those particular sources, they would be redirected to better sources, and so
more appropriate
truth.
Yeah.
And that's coming soon to a laptop near you. Okay, Brian, Queen Elizabeth is leaking, apparently. This is HMS Queen Elizabeth, of course, the aircraft carrier. She is leaking. Now, apparently, it's quite interesting because they've known that she's been leaking for quite some time. Apparently 200 litres per hour coming into the boat, as you said, through a prop shaft seal. But they went ahead with the commissioning ceremony in any case. So this, of course, is being...
Well, they had to go ahead with it because they're out doing sea trials, but of course they've ramped up this ship to be the saviour of UK and UK defence. And they've made such a monster out of it that to actually admit this thing is probably going to have to go back into dry dock to have these seals replaced or repaired, but I suspect replaced. They just can't face the publicity over this. So we've got a new build ship. Do new build ships get problems? Yes. But we've got a major problem here on this ship, which they're saying, well, we're not going to deal with it at the moment, but later my suspicion is that aircraft carrier will have to go back into dry dock to have this sorted out. Would this be such a big issue if all of the rest of the Royal Navy was operating properly? The answer would probably be maybe not. But we've now got Type 45 warships that are not at sea due to engine problems, overheating problems. We've got nuclear submarines not at sea due to machinery problems, lack of spares, lack of trained people. So this is just the icing on the cake. But I wonder whether you could pop back to the picture of the two on board the carrier that you had there, because I'm pretty sure that what the Defence Secretary is saying is it true there's a hole in your bottom?
Right. Okay. Well, I have to say the mainstream media coverage of this has been spectacular. Here's a typical headline from the Express: exposed. Queen's new £3.1 billion warship sinking as critics slam MOD for getting mugged off. Now, 200 litres an hour, Brian, on a ship with this displacement, how long would it take to sink, do you think?
Well, it probably wouldn't, Mike, due to compartmentalisation of warships. So if we look at this thing, however, problems with propeller shafts on board warships or even a merchant ship is a significant problem, because eventually you're going to go into problems with overheating of bearings and shafts. You're going to end up with distortion of the propeller shaft, and then you are into absolute major repairs. So this is one of these things. What's the old saying? Something for saving the ship for a ha'porth of tar. This is it. This is a small thing at the moment, very significant though, and they're trying to fob it off.
And then we have the other response, which is typical of this tweet here. Sad to see so many relishing HMS Queen Elizabeth's very minor leak. Even seen one person trying to say it's proof we shouldn't be leaving the EU. Reality is sea trials are supposed to put ship through paces to identify exactly this sort of issues. This issue, not disaster, some are claiming it is.
Well, this is, can't read it from here. I think it's James Happy MP,
That's right, yeah.
James Happy MP. So this is misinformation for the public, because the critical fact here is this is another unit, another new major unit coming into the fleet that is not fit for purpose. We could start discussing the aircraft at this point, but this is symptomatic of major problems inside the Royal Navy at the moment. This is not accidental. All of these problems are the result of engineered policy within the Royal Navy.
Well, let's speak about aircraft, because the 14th useless F-35 has now been delivered. This is the final F-35 for the first batch in the British fleet for this ship. That has been delivered to Southern California, where they're being tested at the moment, because that's the best place to test aircraft that are going to be deployed to sea, is in the desert.
Well, a lot of this, Mike, is of course they've got to go there because it's all locked into the to the global defence companies that are producing this beast. But of course, the other thing is that all of this technological know-how no longer exists in the United Kingdom, because it's been stripped out. So we are now beholden on a foreign company to provide the whole of our air defence requirements at sea. This is very serious stuff, and we've got to stay on the case.
Okay, the Conservative Party pushed this out today. Britain's record on job creation is second to none, and this year's survey shows that this is set to continue in 2018, according to Neil Carberry from the CBI, as more than half of businesses plan to take on more staff next year. So the Conservative Party crowing about their employment record. And well, we didn't get a chance to cover the recent unemployment figures. And this just sort of inspired me to have another look at it, because this is pretty obscene. At no point in any discussion about jobs from any politicians actually, but particularly from the Conservative Party, is there any discussion of the types of jobs or the quality of jobs? It's just jobs. What sort of jobs are being created at the moment? This is a very important point in my mind.
Well, the moment you ask that, Mike, shelf stacking comes to my mind. The jobs that aren't being created are proper apprenticeship jobs, proper skilled jobs, where young people in particular are being given skills training that's going to see them through a whole career, and ultimately their efforts are going to produce worthwhile products for the United Kingdom.
Well, that certainly isn't going to happen, as we're going to see in a second. So let's. This was the main graph from the Office for National Statistics. It shows that the unemployment rate fell a little bit to 4.3% in the months to October 2017. The employment rate fell by a little bit, so 75.1 people in employment apparently. The level of employment fell by 50,000 for men and 6,000 for women, and there were other equally useless statistics. But I thought this was an interesting one, because we've got an increase in the number of people moving from employment to unemployment, an increase in the number of people moving from employment to inactivity. These are people that are considered to be economically inactive. We've got a reduction in the number of people moving from unemployment to employment, from unemployment to, well, you can see it goes on. Basically, nothing has changed actually, because if you net all those bars out, it really doesn't make very much difference. It didn't stop the Conservative Party telling us what a great job they were doing, but this is the key point. What are the types of jobs? And as we can see, manufacturing, Brian, very, very small proportion of people finding work in manufacturing. Most people are finding work in services jobs or in useless jobs. So it's the quality of the jobs that I think is important. And when we see all the headlines that we've seen in the last 2 or 3 months about this productivity issue that we have in this country, this is a reflection of the types of jobs that are being created. And so it was a bit ironic that a few days ago the government published a nice big paper on opportunities for the steel industry. Now, of course, steel needed for manufacturing, but we don't do much manufacturing in this country anymore. But anyway, they published this document of opportunities for steel, £3.8 billion worth of opportunities. These are not contracts that are being awarded. These are opportunities that the steel industry in this country can bid for. This is independent research, they say, into high value opportunities for the UK steel industry. So let's just have a look at some of them. And what do we find here? Well, if we look at Hinkley Point C, for example, this project has a large and varied demand for steel. This includes around 200,000 tonnes of reinforcement in concrete structures, over 600,000 plates and various other types of things. Now the question is, with the Hinkley Point project, is that steel going to come from Britain or is it going to come from China? I think I know the answer to that. Then we go on down the list, and what do we find? Well, the value of the opportunities is unknown at this stage. The scheme is in approval stage. So actually these aren't opportunities at all, because they are projects that may never happen. Appraisal stage, sorry, I apologise. And so it goes on. Value not known. This is for all the defence contracts. The value of the contracts is not known. Are these contracts actually going to appear? This to me, Brian, absolutely reflects the so-called infrastructure pipeline, which the government published during the year, much earlier in the year, where if you actually look through the projects that are in the infrastructure pipeline, 90% of them are unfunded. The government is expecting the private sector to provide the funding for these infrastructure projects, so they don't actually exist. And it's the same with this. So the steel industry is going to get the opportunity, apparently, to apply for contracts which may or may not come about.
Well, I think we've also got to mention the Kinnock family. So, of course, Neil and Glynis Kinnock, supposedly staunch Labour, the people who should be looking after a proper workforce. But it was their son, Stephen Kinnock, who was busy liaising with Tata Steel when the South Wales steel plant was in a precarious position. So what we see is Britain's own politicians simply going overseas and arranging deals, when what they should be doing is supporting workers at home in the community.
Well, I mean, it's worse than that, Brian, because the Daily Mail last year reported that Britain had blocked an EU bid to raise the tariff on Chinese steel because Britain wants to import steel from China. We had the Times saying that Britain will be a target for steel dumping by China. And we had the Mirror saying that building Britain's warships with foreign steel is a shameful snub to UK workers.
Sorry, it's not a snub, Mike, is it? Because actually it destroys their jobs.
Absolutely.
That's what it does.
Absolutely.
So this is Mirror spin, but at least that Guardian reporter was pleased that she'd been working for the Mirror.
Yes, absolutely. So, we got to change this in 2018. We got to get refocused on our productivity and the types of jobs that we create and make them much higher value jobs, give people a proper salary
training
and proper training.
Yeah, and then we start to get somewhere. That's it from us.
Are we going to say Happy Christmas?
We're going to say Happy Christmas.
Or should we say Merry Christmas?
Happy and Merry Christmas. We will be back on the 3rd of January 2018. We look forward to seeing you, but please bring some friends. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.